The arms industry is a global business that manufactures weapons and military technology and equipment. It consists of commercial industry involved in research, development, production, and the service of military material, equipment, and facilities. Arms-producing companies, also referred to as defense contractors or military industry, produce arms mainly for the armed forces of states. Departments of government also operate in the arms industry, buying and selling weapons, munitions and other military items. Products include guns, ammunition, missiles, military aircraft, military vehicles, ships, electronic systems, and more. The arms industry also conducts significant research and development and provides other logistics and operations support. It is estimated that yearly, over $1.5 trillion are spent on military expenditures worldwide. This represents a decline from 1990 when military expenditures made up 4% of world GDP. Part of this goes to the procurement of military hardware and services from the military industry. The combined arms sales of the top 100 largest arms-producing companies amounted to an estimated $315 billion in 2006. In 2004 over $30 billion was spent in the international arms trade. The arms trade has also been one of the sectors impacted by the credit crunch, with total deal value in the market halving from $32.9 billion to $14.3 billion in 2008. Many industrialized countries have a domestic arms industry to supply their own military forces. Some countries also have a substantial legal or illegal domestic trade in weapons for use by its citizens. An illegal trade in small arms is prevalent in many countries and regions affected by political instability. The Small Arms Survey estimates 875 million small arms in circulation worldwide, produced by more than 1,000 companies from nearly 100 countries. Contracts to supply a given country's military are awarded by the government, making arms contracts of substantial political importance. The link between politics and the arms trade can result in the development of what U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower described as a military-industrial congressional complex, where the armed forces, commerce, and politics become closely linked. The European defense procurement is more or less analogous to the U.S. military-industrial complex. Various corporations, some publicly held, others private, bid for these contracts, which are often worth many billions of dollars. Sometimes, such as the contract for the new Joint Strike Fighter, a competitive tendering process takes place, where the decision is made on the merits of the design submitted by the companies involved. Other times, no bidding or competition takes place. History. Trade in arms and technological diffusion is as old as the history of war itself. During the early modern period, France, England, Netherlands and some states in Germany became self-sufficient in arms production, with diffusion and migration of skilled workers to more peripheral countries such as Portugal and Russia. The modern arms industry emerged in the second half of the 19th century as a product of the creation and expansion of the first large military-industrial companies. As smaller countries could no longer produce cutting-edge military equipment with their indigenous resources and capacity, they increasingly began to contract the manufacture of military equipment, such as battleships, artillery pieces and rifles to foreign firms. In 1854, the British government awarded a contract to the Elsig Ordnance Company of industrialist William Armstrong for the supply of his latest breech-loading rifled artillery pieces. This decision galvanized the private sector into weapons production, with the surplus being increasingly exported to foreign countries. Armstrong became one of the first international arms dealers, selling his weapons systems to governments across the world, from Brazil to Japan. In 1884 he opened a shipyard at Elsig to specialize in warship production. At the time, it was the only factory in the world that could build a battleship and arm it completely. The factory produced warships for many navies, including the Imperial Japanese Navy. Several Armstrong cruisers played an important role in defeating the Russian fleet at the Battle of Tsushima in 1905. In 1885, France decided to capitalize on this increasingly lucrative form of trade and repealed its ban on weapon exports. The regulatory framework for the period up to the First World War was characterized by a laissez-faire policy that placed little obstruction in the way of weapons exports. Due to the carnage of World War I, arms traders began to be regarded with odium as merchants of death, and were accused of having instigated and perpetuated the war in order to maximize their profits from arms sales. An inquiry into these allegations in Britain failed to find evidence to support these allegations. However, the sea change in attitude about war more generally, meant that governments began to control and regulate the trade themselves. The volume of the arms trade greatly increased during the 20th century and it began to be used as a political tool, especially during the Cold War where the United States and the USSR supplied weapons to their proxies across the world, particularly Third World countries. Sectors. Land-based weapons. This category includes everything from light arms to heavy artillery, and the majority of producers are small. Many are located in Third World countries. International trade in handguns, machine guns, tanks, armored personnel carriers, and other relatively inexpensive weapons is substantial. There is relatively little regulation at the international level, and as a result, many weapons fall into the hands of organized crime, rebel forces, terrorists, or regimes under sanctions. Small Arms, the Control Arms Campaign, founded by Amnesty International, Oxfam, and the International Action Network on Small Arms, estimated in 2003 that there are over 639 million small arms in circulation, and that over 1,135 companies based in more than 98 different countries manufacture small arms as well as their various components and ammunition. Aerospace systems. Encompassing military aircraft, conventional missiles, and military satellites, this is the most technologically advanced sector of the market. It is also the least competitive from an economic standpoint, with a handful of companies dominating the entire market. The top clients and major producers are virtually all located in the Western world and Russia, with the United States easily in first place. Prominent aerospace firms include Dassault Aviation, Sukhoi, Mikoyan, EADS, Finmeccanica, Thales Group, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and BAE Systems. There are also several multinational consortia mostly involved in the manufacturing of fighter jets, such as the Eurofighter. The largest military contract in history, signed in October 2001, involved the development of the Joint Strike Fighter. Naval systems. All of the world's major powers maintain substantial maritime forces to provide a global presence, with the largest nations possessing aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines and advanced anti-air defense systems. The vast majority of military ships are conventionally powered, but some are nuclear-powered. There is also a large global market in second-hand naval vessels, generally purchased by developing countries from Western governments. World's largest defense budgets. This is a list of the 10 countries with the highest defense budgets for the year 2013. The information is from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. World's largest arms exporters. The units in this table are so-called trend indicator values expressed in millions of US dollars at 1990s prices. These values do not represent real financial flows but are a crude instrument to estimate volumes of arms transfers, regardless of the contracted prices, which can be as low as zero in the case of military aid. Ordered by descending 2013 values. The information is from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. The units in this table are so-called trend indicator values expressed in millions of US dollars at 1990s prices. These values do not represent real financial flows but are a crude instrument to estimate volumes of arms transfers, regardless of the contracted prices, which can be as low as zero in the case of military aid. Ordered by descending 2000 to Euro 2010 values. The information is from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Next to SIPRI there are several other sources that provide data on international transfers of arms. These include national reports by national governments about arms exports, the UN Register on Conventional Arms and an annual publication by the U.S. Congressional Research Service that includes data on arms exports to developing countries as compiled by U.S. intelligence agencies. A list of such sources can be found at the SIPRI website. Due to the different methodologies and definitions used, different sources often provide significantly different data. For example, according to Statistisk Sentralbyrå, Norway exports a greater value of arms than many of the nations listed above. Some of the differences are possibly due to deliberate over- or under-reporting by some of the sources. Governments may claim high arms exports as part of their role in marketing efforts of their national arms industry, or they may claim low arms exports in order to be perceived as a responsible international actor. As of 2008, Britain has become the world's leading developer of arms with British company BAE Systems. Defense group BAE Systems is the first company outside the United States to reach the top position, thanks to a deal with the Pentagon for mine-resistant vehicles to be used in Iraq and Afghanistan. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, a defense think tank, the former British Aerospace Group's arms sales are ahead of American market leaders Lockheed Martin and Boeing. The report reveals BAE's U.S. subsidiary was alone responsible for 61.5% of the group's arms sales and around 58.5% of total group sales. This demonstrates BAE's increasing reliance on orders for conventional weapons as the United States cuts back on its nuclear arsenal. The British figures were also boosted by orders for Eurofighter Typhoon jets from Saudi Arabia. World's largest arms importers, the units in this table are so-called trend indicator values expressed in millions of US dollars. These values do not represent real financial flows but are a crude instrument to estimate volumes of arms transfers, regardless of the contracted prices, which can be as low as zero in the case of military aid. List of major weapon manufacturers. Private military contractors are private companies that provide logistics, manpower, and other expenditures for a military force. Major arms industry corporations by nation. Largest arms industry companies. This is a list of the world's top 10 arms manufacturers and other military service companies. The information is based on a list published by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute for 2012. The list provided by the SIPRI excludes companies based in China. Institutes participating in weapon research and warfare simulation. Netherlands Organisation for Applied Scientific Research, Bolt, Beranek and Newman, Kinetic, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, Arms Control. Oscar Arias Sanchez, President of Costa Rica, has stated, "International treaties for arms control." The Arms Trade Treaty was adopted by the UN General Assembly on April 2, 2013. On entry into force, it will establish legally binding international standards for the international transfer of conventional arms, ammunition and parts and components therefor. The Missile Technology Control Regime is an informal and voluntary partnership between 34 countries to prevent the proliferation of missile and unmanned aerial vehicle technology capable of carrying a 500 kg payload at least 300 km. The limitation of naval armament included many separate treaties. In general, the treaties involved the United States, United Kingdom, Japan, and France. The Convention on Cluster Munitions is an international treaty that prohibits the use of cluster bombs, a type of explosive weapon which scatters submunitions over an area. The Outer Space Treaty, formerly known as the Treaty on Principles Governing the Activities of States in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, is a treaty that forms the basis of international space law. The Ottawa Treaty or the Mine Ban Treaty, formerly the Convention on the Prohibition of the Use, Stockpiling, Production and Transfer of Anti-Personnel Mines and on their destruction, completely bans all anti-personnel landmines. The New START Treaty is a bilateral nuclear arms reduction treaty between the United States and the Russian Federation that was signed in Prague on April 8, 2010. The Protocol for the Prohibition of the Use in War of Asphyxiating, Poisonous or Other Gases, and of Bacteriological Methods of Warfare, usually called the Geneva Protocol, is a treaty prohibiting the first use of chemical and biological weapons. It was signed at Geneva on June 17, 1925, and entered into force on February 8, 1928. It was registered in League of Nations Treaty Series on September 7, 1929. The Chemical Weapons Convention is an arms control agreement which outlaws the production, stockpiling and use of chemical weapons. The Biological Weapons Convention was the first multilateral disarmament treaty banning the production of an entire category of weapons. It was the result of prolonged efforts by the international community to establish a new instrument that would supplement the 1925 Geneva Protocol. The European Council stated to the United Nations General Assembly, see also. References. External links: Amnesty International, Arms Trade, the British Library Euro Defence Industry Guide, Campaign Against Arms Trade, ControlArms.org, Defence Industrial Base blog by Geoffrey Peter Bradford, FAS's Arms Sales Monitoring Project, The Guardian's Arms Trade Report, List of participators of the Defence System and Equipment International Conference in London, 2003, SIPRI Arms Industry Reports and Database, SIPRI List of Top 100 Arms Producing Companies, Spade Defence Index Defence Sector Market Index, The True Cost of Global Arms Trade, infographic included, UN Office for Disarmament Affairs, U.S. Arms Sales to the Third World from the Dean Peter Croft Foreign Affairs Digital Archives, Victor Bout Arms Trade Case, World Map and Chart of Arms Exports per Country by Lebanese Economy Forum, World Bank Data, World Security Institute's Center for Defense Information ZIHTGO, Arms Trade and International Law, Hart, Oxford, 2007.